You're about to learn how to create this cool beat maker application from scratch using Python and Pygame. This is a great project for both beginners and experienced developers. Pete Lemaster created this course. First, Pete will show off the project, and then he will teach you how to code the project line by line. Check the description for a link to the assets you need plus the final code. Good luck with this project, and feel free to leave a comment with anything you learn in this tutorial.
All right, so I'm super excited to show you guys this project showcase. This is one of the coolest projects I've ever built, and I think you could really enjoy building something similar as well. So the key features of this app include the ability to be able to quickly create and edit brand new beats, as well as the ability to modify the speed at which your loop plays and the total number of beats in that pattern. The buttons on the bottom give you the ability to quickly pause or resume playing the beat, or clear the entire board out when you're ready to restart. You can turn entire channels of instruments off so that you can edit certain parts of your beat while keeping the whole thing playing. Then when you get something you really like, the save menu lets you save that under a name of your choosing so that you can load it back in later and revisit some of your favorite creations. This tool lets you create some really unique sounds, and I hope you enjoy the project. So follow along with the tutorial, grab the code if you want to from the link in the description below. Leave a comment letting me know what additional features you'd like to see in this kind of project, or what you'd like to see on the channel in the future. If you enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for tons more great content. Now let's get into the tutorial. All right, super excited to bring you guys this tutorial, but it is a long one, so let's get right into it and I'll explain what we're doing as we do it. So step one is going to be importing Pygame. If you're familiar with the pip module, then you can use pip and do pip install Pygame. Or if you have an IDE, a good one like PyCharm, which I use, then you usually can do an import statement like that. And as long as it recognizes your module name, it'll take care of the import for you. And then I would say, because this is a heavily music themed application, import the mixer right up front. So pygame.mixer is kind of Pygame's associated sound effects and music handling tool. So we're just going to do that right in the beginning. And then we're going to do pygame.init to kind of initialize it, which we'll need for fonts and using a lot of the built-in functionality. Okay, so that's just how we're going to start it. And next, let's set up our screen. And since this beat making software, if you think about it, it's kind of, you want the same dimensions as your actual screen. So wider than it is tall, because we're anticipating the beats kind of stretching across the screen. So I used 1400 by 800, and I kind of like that, but you can play around with this stylistically if you want to. And I just define a few RGB colors right up front, because I know pretty much every app I make, I'm going to use black, white, and some shade of gray, maybe 50 of them, along the way. And so I just do like black, white, gray. And then when I add other colors later in the project, like I'll for sure be using some like red and maybe a gold in this project, I'll add them up here. But we don't need that right now, so let's keep going. And then the next thing, we're just going to focus on getting the screen created real quick. So it's pygame.display.setMode, set mode, and then in square brackets, just do width, comma, height. There we go. And you could type those numbers directly here. You don't have to put them in a variable. This is much better practice, and if you wanted to change it later, it's a little easier to track down. Something else I like to do, technically this would be considered an optional step, but I always like to set the caption, and I'm just calling this one Beat Maker. You can call it something else if you want. And then I'm going to set up a font right here, which I'll call label font because it's going to be a little bigger. but I always create a text right in the beginning, because as soon as you need text in your game, you're really going to want to have this initialized already. Otherwise, you're just going to have to come back and do this step later. So I say this in almost every project, but if you don't want to go and get a TTF file, almost everyone's computer and install of Pygame is going to come with this one that you see right here, freesansbold.ttf. That's like a built-in. So you can use that one if you just want to follow along and you don't care too much about style. I went and grabbed a free one off the internet that's just called robotobold.ttf. You can see it right here in my file structure. So if you want to grab a font for your project and make it your own, just drop that file right in there and then call it just like this. Okay, and then the only other thing you have to give it here is font size. So we'll give it 32. And that's, we're also going to do FPS, so that's our frame rate, and we're going to set up a timer, which is going to control the speed of our game, which for a music-based application is super important. So we'll do timer equals pygame.time.clock. Some people will call this clock, some people will call it time, some people will just do this directly in the game loop. I don't like doing that, but make sure you have something along this line. And let's go ahead and create our what I call the main game loop. So we go just underneath this, and obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in between our kind of our variable library and our main game loop. But just to get it started, we're going to do this. So we'll set this variable run equal to true, and then we're going to set up a while loop that's while run. And the first few things you always do while run is timer.tick at your frame rate. So now this is saying as long as run is true, we're going to execute this code 60 times per second. So that's the purpose of FPS. And since a lot of our functionality is going to be move on to the next beat every second, every half second, whatever, this timer.tick is super important for this app. So frame rate, you want to keep it at 60. If not, if you use a different frame rate for some reason, just make sure that when we get to the part of the math later where we calculate how many beats per minute, that you use your frame rate in that math. Okay, so then we're going to do screen.fill, and we're going to make the background black. I think that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and set up what's, I always call this event handling, but it's basically just getting all of the occurrences that are actually happening on your computer. So it's for event in pygame.event.get. And this little application here, every code we put, all the code we put inside this for loop is going to be checking all the keys on the keyboard, the movement of the mouse, any other event that the computer can process is going to be inside for event in pygame.event.get. And the first one you want to set up just so your game will run is if event.type is equal to, and then it's pygame.quit, just like this, all caps. And if that's the case, then we just want run to be equal to false. And that's all we're going to do for now, but we're for sure going to be putting a lot of functionality in there later. Okay, and then outside of this, we want to do pygame.display.flip, and that kind of throws everything onto the screen. And then we'll do this last one is just going to be pygame.quit, just like that. So outside of any other code, just on the off chance it gets to that point. Okay, so reformat the format. So now we should just get the shell of our project, and it closed right away because I said robot bold and the file is roboto bold. So there you go. Alrighty, there we go. We've got our outline, and I think that looks pretty sweet. But let's go ahead and now let's start drawing stuff onto the board. So we will get to sounds pretty early in this project, and I will kind of go over how those are used because obviously sounds are super important. But first, I'm going to set up a function that I'm going to call drawGrid, and it's just going to kind of draw all of the static things onto the screen. So I'm going to do that right below my screen.fill is I'm going to call it drawGrid. And then we're going to come up in between, like I said, the variable library and the main game loop. And I'm going to define this variable drawGrid. And we're going to start building this out together. Excuse me. Okay, so let's start with drawGrid and just kind of think of the space that we're going to have in this game. So I'll call kind of the left menu left box. And that's, if you've ever seen like a beat layout, like that kind of app, that's where you have the instruments, and sometimes you have the ability to like turn tracks on or off or adjust volume of the specific instruments. So we'll create kind of a left menu. I'll call it left box, and we'll put it on the screen and we'll make it gray. So that's why I call that color in the beginning. And then we'll start at the top left corner, so at the very corner, and we'll make it 200 wide, and we'll make it the full height of the screen. So these are the 4 arguments you give rectangles: X and Y starting coordinate in the top left of your box, and then width, and then height. And then after that, these are now optional. So this would just give you enough right here. Let me see if I run it. It should work. We get this left box, which looks fine. But now if we add one more argument, we're going to say how wide we want the edges to be, which is going to make it a hollow object. So it's going to have a width of 5. And I think that looks better as a left menu. Personal preference. You can leave it totally thick if you want. But then let's also add a bottom menu, which I'll call bottom box. And we're going to pygame.draw.rect. This is where we're going to put like our player controls, like start and stop the loop of the game. So like play, pause. I guess I say game, you understand, it's an app. But we're going to put like play, pause, and then also like save and load. So the options to save your beat or load in a previously saved beat, or adjust the speed or how many beats are in your app total. We'll put them in this bottom box. So we're going to call that screen, gray. And then for this rectangle, let's put it at the bottom, and actually let's make it just 200 high. So height minus 200. So that's going to be the starting position. And then we'll make it for width, the full width of the screen, and 200 high. And let's make this hollow with 5 as well. And what you'll see if I do this now, we're going to have this kind of weird rectangle. Maybe you like that look, maybe you don't. I'm going to take my left box, and I'm deciding I'm going to stop it 200 high as well. So now we won't have that like crisscross overlap in the bottom. I think that looks pretty good. So we will move on. The next thing I want to do is I want to start creating the beat. So we are going to make it so that it's adjustable how many boxes are in here. But just to start, we're going to just set it up so we can get something on the screen. So what I'll say is I'm going to create a little empty variable here that I'll call boxes, just like that. And I'm going to create a little colors library. So colors equals gray, white, gray. And some of this stuff we're not going to touch for a little while. So if you don't want to follow along line for line, I guess you can skip that for now, but we are going to come back to it. Sorry, gray, white, gray. So we're going to do those, but now what we want to do is thinking of a drum kit. The first 3 most important instruments are hi-hat, snare, and kick. So what I'll start doing is kind of creating space for those. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call it hi-hat text. And now we call that label font that we have. And it's labelfont.font, labelfont.render. We already defined it as a font. And then you give it the text, and for the hi-hat, we will just say hi-hat. That should make sense. And then the second one is like anti-alias as a Boolean. It's always true in my experience. I don't actually know. I don't know a scenario where it wouldn't be. And then later, when we have the ability to turn a channel on or off, so you set up a beat and you want to disable the hi-hat, we'll make this a variable. So we will be coming back to this, but for now I'm just going to make it white to not overcomplicate the early steps of it. And we're going to draw it on the screen, so screen.blit, and you give it what text you want. So we want hi-hat text to get drawn on the screen, and that needs an X and Y coordinate. And I'm going to move it a little bit down and a little bit right from the top corner, even though this is our first one. And so this should be all we have to do to see the text hi-hat. So I think that looks pretty good. And now let's go ahead and let's just basically take this exact stuff, C, Control V, and let's do snare and kick. So hi-hat text, we'll do snare text next. Snare and snare text. And then what we'll do is we'll move it down 100. So I believe we made the game 800 high. The bottom menu is 200 high, and we're going to put a total of 6 instruments in here. So we're going to do a hi-hat, a snare, a kick drum, a crash cymbal, and then we'll do like a floor tom, and we'll do a clap. Those are kind of the 6 most basic beats. If you want, you can grab your own soundboard, and we'll go over that a little bit later. And make whatever sounds you want. You can make as many instruments as you want. I'm kind of giving you the backbone of how to set it up, though. So that'll be snare and hi-hat. Let's go ahead and do the next 2, which will be, we'll call it kick, because it's a kick drum, but you can call it bass if you want. And what the heck, we'll say bass drum on the text. That's probably what people are more familiar with. And we'll say kick text. Okay, and let's do after kick, let's do the crash cymbal, and crash text. And we're moving these down 100 for each of them, so 200, 300, and we're just going to have 2 more. So we have bass drum and crash, and then we are going to want to do the clap and the floor tom. So clap and floor tom. Okay, and so we'll go to 330, 430, 530. Now let's just draw this and see. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I think what would make sense is putting lines in between them to kind of delineate those. So why don't we draw those as well? After this text, we'll just do for I in range, and I think we want 6 because there's 6 instruments. So for I in range 6. And we'll do this pygame.draw.line screen. We'll make it gray so it blends in with the edges. And we'll start it at 0. And then for height, we'll want it to be I times 100. So I times 100. But since we don't want the first one to be at the very top because the box already starts at the very top, and for loops, it's going to start at 0. And then it's going to go to 5. That's just kind of how for loops in Python work. They're not edge inclusive for the number 6. So it's going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we want these lines drawn at 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And I guess we don't technically need 600, but it shouldn't affect anything. So starting position, we'll do we'll do 0 and I times 100 plus 100. I think that'd be a little better. Or you could just add 1 to range, I guess. That doesn't matter. All right, and then end position. We'll want it to go, let's see, to 200, right? That's how wide we made that menu. And then we want the same y coordinate, so it's a vertical line. Let's copy that and put that in here. Alrighty, and since the edges of the menu are 5, let's make these lines 5 as well, and let's see if that gives us lines in between all of our instruments. I did something stupid. I don't know why I have this square bracket in here. You do not need a square bracket if you're drawing a line. So the line arguments are the screen, the color, start position as an X and Y 2-coordinate tuple, end position as a 2-coordinate tuple, and then line thickness. And let's see if 5 is a little too thick. That's okay. Let's see if it looks better as 3 maybe. Since these aren't the outer edges of our menu, maybe that would look better. Yeah, I'd like 3 more. You can do whatever you want. If you want it thicker, make it thicker. But that's good for me for now. And now what I think we want to do is we want to start considering how this game is going to work, how this app is going to work in terms of the beats. So we're going to have a variable that we'll set right now in the beginning, beats, and we're just going to make it equal to 8. That's a very simple, basic setup that we could do. But we need to use beats in this app to check how many boxes we need to draw for each instrument. So to do that, we do for I in range and then beats. And let's create a variable that I will call instruments. And we'll use this a few times throughout just to check how many rows there are. So I guess you could call this variable rows if you want. I'm going to say instruments because there's 6 different sounds that we have in here. And I'm also going to, instead of for I in range 6, I'm going to say for I in range instruments. But the reason I'm doing that is because we're creating a grid basically for I in range beats, and then for J in range, and this is instruments. And so this is another way, hopefully, if you have the interest in creating this game, or app, whatever. I'll say game probably throughout this because the module is called Pygame, and I do so many games. But so if you want to add more instruments, we're creating it now to where all you'll really have to do is adjust how thick each instrument should be. So you could make it to where it was a function of that 600 vertical space that we have. You could give them each 50 instead of 100 and then have 12 instruments. Totally up to you. But we're creating nested for loops here. So for I in range beats and then for J in range instruments, what we'll do is we will say that we're going to draw this rectangle equal to pygame.draw.rect, and we'll put it on the screen. And for now, I'm going to just make them gray as well. And we are going to make the, let's see, we want to make the thickness of them. I'm trying to think here. I don't want to misspeak. We want the thickness of them to be, we want the starting position to be I, so that'll be our beat. That's going to be for the X. The starting position will be I times, and then we will want the total width that we have available for beats, which is the width of the screen minus 200. So we have this width of the screen minus 200, put it inside parentheses like this, and then we're going to use something called floor division. And we're going to floor divide by the beats. So this floor division just makes sure that it's an integer because for X and Y pixel position, I guess it's not exactly pixel position, but it has to be an integer. So like, let's say this right now would be 1200 divided by 8 because that's how many beats we have. This is going to start it at 1200 divided by 8, which is like 150. But if for some reason it was like not an even division, this would make sure that it stays an integer. Okay, and then we'll want to move it a little bit to the right initially. So as always, as I said with for loops, this is going to start with 0, but we don't want it to start at 0. So we'll add the first 200 to it, and then I guess it's a 5 thick rectangle. So we'll add the first 205 to it. And this is just our X starting position. So this rectangle is going to take some math, so bear with me. For the Y starting position, it's a little easier because we don't have a top menu. So it'll be J times 100. And here it's actually okay that it starts at 0. We'll just do plus 5 because we're going to give it a width of 5 as a border. Excuse me. So actually, we don't need a border on the top. It can be right up against the top. And this one will be okay as well, right up against that menu. So we'll do just plus 200 and then J times 100. And then for the actual rectangle, we will say, excuse me, for the actual width, we want it to be the, again, width minus 200. And this is going to be really important to make it adjustable to where it works for any number of beats, because a big function of our app is going to be that it's adjustable in that front. So again, just do the width minus 200 floor divided by the beats. This will always give you the largest possible width, but still make each box even. And then for the height, since we have 6 instruments, we could do it this way. We could do height divided by instruments, but it's not exactly height divided by instruments because we have a 200 width, 200 height bottom menu. So it would be height minus 200 divided by instruments, and you should really make this a floor division as well. But because this is 800 and we know that 800 minus 200 is 600 and we have 6 instruments, this is effectively the same thing as putting a 100 here. So if you want to just make the height 100, go ahead and do that. If you understand what's going on and you want to do this math because you want it to be scalable again, then do that by all means. Okay, so let's see what we have to do here, because this format doesn't look quite right. I think I just need to close the parentheses. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit here because this line is a run-on. So let me just copy that into a new row. There we go. And let's make this a width of 5 and a rounded rectangle. Those will look good. Statement founded. Let's see why we're getting errors here. I probably just did something silly on the formatting. Oh, I have too many close brackets. All right, I'm not going crazy. Sorry for a little bit of troubleshooting. It's just sometimes you put one too many parentheses in there. So let's just double check real quick for these rectangles, because we're doing some advanced math here, but once it's set up properly, it's going to immediately be scalable to the whole app. So we are starting it at the beat. So if there's 8 beats, it's going to start at 200, and then it's going to calculate how much room it has on the screen, and it's going to automatically update to take as much space as it can, and then it'll do the same thing based on how many instruments. And we're going to make it a rounded rectangle, which is what this second 5 is for, and we're going to make it 5 thick so that it should be hollow rectangle. Now let's see, because we should get 8 beats, fingers crossed. That's not bad. we get 8 beats right now per instrument, and they fill the whole screen, and that looks pretty good right there. So you can see we're getting kind of the rudimentary shape of this fleshed out, which I think looks pretty good. So let's see, we'll come back and we'll improve the style later. I think what's going to be important is we start taking a look at how to get this kind of functional, because that's going to be really satisfying if we can start actually implementing that a little bit sooner rather than later. So what I think we want to do, because you'll remember at the beginning of this, I created this empty list for boxes. Well, as we go through and create all these rectangles, what we want to do is add some information to this list that I made called boxes, because we need to bring that information back from our function so that we can check if these things are getting clicked. So what we're going to do is we're going to, every time we call draw grid, we're going to empty out the boxes variable right here. We're going to make it empty, and then we're going to draw all of these rectangles onto the screen, and then we're going to return some information in this list. So what I want it to be is, you can kind of think of it as a tuple, where inside the tuple, one of the 2 arguments is another tuple. So if that's too confusing for you, think of it this way. We're returning a couple things. We're returning the rectangle of each beat, but then we're also returning an X and Y coordinate for it. So we're returning what beat it is, which is the I, and then we're also returning what row it's in, which is the J. And then we're actually returning the full rectangle, and the reason we're doing that is because we're going to use that for the collision detection to see if it was clicked on. And then what we will do next is we will just return that boxes variable we just talked about. So where we called draw grid, let me reformat that just so it likes how many spaces. So when we call draw grid down here, we need to get boxes back from it. So let's go back down to our game loop, and where we get boxes is right here. Okay, and what we need to do is use that boxes list to check and see if we clicked on any of the boxes. So that's not too bad. We just have to add some new collision detection. So what we do is we come down into where we have this if event.type equals pygame.quit, and we do if event.type equals, and then this one is going to be pygame.mouse button down, which is what is if you're clicking the button down and haven't yet released it. So there's mouse button up and mouse button down in Pygame, and that's what we're going to start with. And we're going to create a loop that's going to iterate through the entire list. So we'll say for I in range, and then the length of boxes. And the reason we're making it the length of boxes is that list, which also means actually in the very beginning, this is an important thing. Anytime you create a variable, even if it's one that you get from a function, if you're going to use it in your main loop, you need to have it initialized somewhere, or it's going to say that it was referenced before it existed. So for I in range, and then the length of boxes. And the reason for that is every time we update the total beats, whether it goes from 8 to 12 to 16 to 20, whatever, that list is going to get significantly longer or shorter. And so this has to be scalable to check that whole thing. So for I in range, length of boxes, if boxes, and here's where we have to be very careful about the way that we addressed each item in there. So boxes at I, so that just means we're going through the list of boxes that we defined, and we're checking each box at I, which is going to call up the whole tuple, so rectangle and then coordinates, and then we check 0. So that's referencing the rectangle that we stored in there, and so the reason we did that is because now we can use Pygame's built-in collide_rect function, which is this super useful built-in tool which checks if an X and Y coordinate, which in this case will be the mouse, and it's checking to see if it collided with a rectangle. So in this case, if collide_rect with event.pause. So event.pause is the position at which the mouse was when the mouse button down occurred. So the position that our mouse is in when we click. And if it collides with it, so this is already right here going to check if we clicked on any of the rectangles that we just defined. So we're creating a really powerful function. And we're going to say coords is equal to boxes at I and then 1. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's a little bit easier than referencing the X and Y coordinates as boxes 1, 0, and then boxes 1, 1 like that. This is just going to give me this temporary variable called coords, which we're going to use right below to track whether or not something has been actively clicked. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to do, and here's where we're going to need to create a new list, because we are going to take clicked at coords, and I guess actually we have to be careful about this. We put the I and then J, and J is what row it's in. So actually we're going to want coords 1 and then coords 0, and I think I missed a box. There we go. Okay, and we're going to want to set that equal to the opposite of whatever it was. So let's go ahead and create the clicked list. And the reason I say list is because this is what's going to keep track of what variables have actually been, of what beats have been selected or not. So at the very beginning, I'm going to create this list, and we're going to do it in such a way that we define what's basically a full list of negative ones. So I'm choosing to make -1 mean it's not currently active, and 1 means it is currently active. I think that's the easiest way to do it, and I think you'll see why in just a second. So let's do it this way. Let's say clicked, and this is our list of what beats are selected and what ones aren't. And we'll say clicked for underscore in, because when you're just doing it right here, you don't really need a variable like I or something to reference. So we'll just do for underscore in range beats. So this is going to create initially a list that is that size. And so for underscore in range beats, and then it is going to be that for underscore in range instruments. Okay, so this is going to create a list as soon as the game starts up that, because beats initially is 8 and instruments is 6, it'll be 8 -1s in one list, and then it'll be a list of 6 rows of 8 -1s. So it creates this really useful array, essentially a list of lists that's going to initially be all -1. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because then when you click on a box, we can set it equal to -1 of itself. So we'll multiply it by -1. So if it's a 1, it'll become -1. But if it's a -1, it'll become a 1. And the reason we're going to do it that way is we can use that list to draw all of the active all of the active rectangles. So if they're a 1, that means they've been selected and they'll be green. So this is a really versatile way of setting that up. But what it does mean is that we'll have to pass the clicked list into our draw grid. So we'll just come up here, draw grid, and we'll pass in the clicked list, which is fine. It's not like that's an inconvenience. And what we'll do is we'll come up and we will say, now remember I said we're going to check for each of these rectangles, and we'll adjust the color based on whether or not they're active. So I'm going to add a few more colors here. I'm going to say green is equal to RGB. It's just all the green, 02550. And actually that'll be plain for now, because we're just going to make it, if it's active, then we will have it draw green. Okay. And we need to make sure we're receiving the argument clicked. And sometimes inside of your function, it's not a bad idea to use a different variable name. Like I know I used boxes, but because we totally reset it every time, that's not really a problem. But we're not overwriting clicked in the draw function. We're just using it. So what we'll do here is we'll come down and say boxes equals colors. Okay. So let's do this for I in range beats, and then for J in range instruments, let's add something down here that's going to say if clicks at, and this is going to be, again, J then I, because the first item is going to be what row it is, and then I is going to be what column it's in. And we'll say if it's equal to -1, then we'll have our color that we're currently using be gray because it's not active. But then what we'll say is else, and you could say elif, and you could check if clicks is equal to -1. But then we'll say else color will be equal to green. Okay. And now I'm actually going to keep this one because this rectangle is essentially the outline of the rectangle, and there's no reason to mess with that exactly, other than I just want to put a few more stylistic things in here. So we don't need this second one. Well, let's make the colorful one the rectangle that we actually reference. So we'll leave this alone down here. But then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, on the screen at our color, and then we want this one to be solid. So if you want it to be a rounded rectangle, which I think would look good, but you want it to be solid, then just make this argument a 0, and that'll make it solid. Okay. Now let's see what else we can do since we're in here. I think maybe I'd like the idea of doing like a gold, just to upgrade our style a little bit. So since we're here and we just made a green, I'll also make a gold. And I pulled this RGB ahead of time, 212, 175, 55, 212, 175, 55. If you have a color in mind that you'd like to use, just Google RGB value and then the name of your color, and you'll be able to select through everything on the internet. Finding RGBs is not hard. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just essentially move this rectangle that we just made that is a specific color. Let's move this one inside of the parameters of this outer rectangle. So here's where we'll scoot them around. We'll move this one down 5 and in 5, and then we'll make it this width, I think, -10. So we're basically putting it inside the frame that we built before. And we'll make it this height -10 as well, since we're putting inside a frame that's 10 by 10. All right, and we'll leave this, let's make this one maybe black, and let's put this gold frame kind of inside of it. So I'm doing kind of a 3-tiered effect, and this is purely for style, so sorry if you didn't like this detour, but I think it really adds to the look of the project. And what we'll do is we'll make this gold one a full 5 by 5, and then we'll put a black like wire inside of it. So let's just go ahead and load this up before we do too much and lose sight of the project. But what you're seeing is none of these have been clicked. And so what I have currently is a gold rim of 5 with a smaller, only 2 thickness black rim around each of them, but it gives it really cool depth to it, I think. Now let's try clicking. Okay, we got an error. Object must be rect style event. I totally agree. Let's take a look at what we're doing here. So we are passing in the rectangle, pygame.draw.rect. Yep, that should be right. And then we're returning boxes. For boxes.append. That looks good. Oh, silly mistake, because I used collide rect in this position, but it needs to be collide point, because what we're checking is if the rectangle at boxes I0 is colliding with our mouse click, which is just a point. So this needs to be collide point, not collide rect. Let's load it and try to click some now. Okay, so there we go. We get hi-hat green, which is pretty sweet, and I can select multiples, and now can I turn it back off? Yes, I can. Let's see if I can select them kind of from all over. Yeah, so that's perfect. That's the functionality we want. And now you're probably aware that we do not yet have any sort of movement across the board to actually play the notes if we've selected them. And I promise we're getting close to actually having sound, which is really the fun part of it. Okay, but what we need to do is we need to do some math to essentially calculate how long should each beat be. And so what I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll create a variable and I'll call it beat length. And what it's going to be equal to, and this is where I mentioned right at the beginning, if you used a different frame rate, then this needs to be adjusted a little bit more. Whoops, BPM. So we haven't created a variable yet called BPM, but that's going to be another part of this game. So we'll say beats per minute is going to be 240 initially, which is 4 beats per second, which is pretty fast. But that's what we'll use right in the beginning. And so that means the length of each individual beat as our game is seeing it is going to be 3,600 divided by BPM. If you have to think of it this way, you can think of it as your frames per second times 60, because in each minute, there's 60 seconds, right? And then that's, if you're using a frame rate of 60, that's 60 times 60, which is 3,600. And then we're doing floor division to make sure we get an integer of how many beats per minute we want. So this is how many clicks per minute, essentially, how many loops per minute this while loop is running. And so each individual beat is going to be that number divided by how many beats per minute they're supposed to be. And so what we'll do is we'll say if playing, we'll do it that way. So we'll create a variable, and for now we'll always be playing. So right in the beginning we'll set playing equal to true, but later when we put pause functionality in, it'll be nice to have a variable that controls whether or not we're playing. And so we'll say if playing, then what we'll do is we'll create a new variable, if active length. So how long has the beat that we're currently on been active? And so right when the game starts up, we'll initialize that one as a 0. And so active length is equal to 0 right when we start. So if playing, while playing, if active length is less than beat length, then we want to just add 1 to active length. So we have this variable active length where we track what beat we're currently on, and we're just going to add 1 to it every time that we're not at beat length. But then what we'll say is else. And so this means that the beat has just reached how long it's supposed to be. So just for easy math, if we said we wanted 60 beats per minute, once every second we should move to the next beat. So we'll say else, and then that would make active length equal to 0. And now we need to check if we're at the very end of a cycle and we need to go back to 0, or if we can move on. So what we'll do is we'll create another variable and we'll call it active beat. And we'll say if active beat is less than total beats minus 1, so that means we're not yet at the very end, then we'll add 1 to active beat. And it's given me a, active beat, not active length. And it's given me a red underline because we haven't initialized that one either. So right in the beginning, we'll call active beat 1. And you don't really want to start with 0 because even though in code programming you pretty much always start with 0, for a beat it doesn't really make sense to be at 0 at any point. You're always on beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so active beat, we'll add 1 to it. And then we'll use this variable that's just going to be an on-off variable, beat changed, and we'll set that equal to true. And we're going to use that in just a second to actually play the notes on that beat. So else, then we'll just add, else meaning else against this if statement. If active beat is less than or equal to beats minus 1. And so we'll say else because in theory, if the beat was on like 24 or 26 out of 30, but you decided to reduce the total number of beats, then it wouldn't work to just say, else if active beat is equal to beats. We want to say else covering any scenario, meaning we're not at the end of our loop. So this is saying we've gone too far, set active beat back equal to 0, but beat changed is still going to be equal to true. Okay? And so let's go ahead and I think that should be all we need to do to get it moving. Let's go ahead and say beat changed equals true right in the beginning, because technically as soon as the app loads up, you would want this on. And now we have to do something with that active beat variable. We want to actually draw something on the screen showing what beat we're on. Okay, so what we'll do now is we will just say we want to pass in what beat we're on. So we're already using, let's see. Yeah, we're already using the clicked variable from the outside world, so we'll just come down to clicked, and we'll draw active beat as well. All right, and I want to use a new color for this one so that it kind of pops out at us. And I'm gonna create like kind of a vibrant, not exactly neon blue. I'll just call it blue because it'll be the only thing in my app I'll make blue. But to get this color I'm doing, it's pretty much like a teal or an aqua. It's going to be a lot of G and B. So it's like a neon blue, but I'm just going to call it blue. Anyways, we come into our draw grid function, and underneath everything else we're drawing, let's draw this new thing that I'm just going to call active. And it doesn't really matter. It's just so that I know what I'm drawing, because by the end of this app, there's going to be a lot of code all over the place. So that's just for me. I'm going to put it on the screen. We're going to make it blue. And then we need to start thinking about this rectangle. So it's basically a moving rectangle that shows you what beat you're on. And to do that, we'll use the beat variable that we're passing in, times, and then width, floor divided by 200. Minus 200, sorry. This bit should be familiar to you by now, divided by beats. So we're talking about where we want to start. That beat variable is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you think about it, when it's a 1, we want to start at 200. So it's going to be 1 times this, and then plus 200. So we need to scooch plus 200. And so this means, actually, this might be 200 too far. We'll have to see. Width minus 200. We'll see when we load it up. Because it may be designed to start from 0. Yeah, I wonder if that would be a better way to do it. Well, I'm not worried about it right now. That's something we can tweak later. All right. And then let's see, the Y starting position. Let's have it start at the very top of the screen and then go all the way down to the bottom of the instruments. So then how wide do we want it to be? Well, this one's easy. It's just width minus 200 and then floor divided by the beats. So that is just saying we want this rectangle to be exactly 1 beat wide. And then we will make it as tall as the instruments times 100. So there's 600 high. Basically, it's just a rectangle that's going to be surrounding the entire active beat. And those are the 4 arguments the rectangle needs, except I put the bracket in the wrong spot. There we go. And then let's make this, we certainly don't want this to be a solid rectangle. Let's make it a rounded rectangle of border width 5 and a cornered radius of 3. And let's just see if we correctly have a beat moving across the screen. So I actually think that's pretty sweet. It is starting in the right spot. It is going to the end and then immediately goes back to the beginning. Currently, it's not doing anything with different sounds, but that is the next step. So let's go ahead and finally, the thing you guys have been waiting for. Finally, let's implement some sounds. Okay, and for this, I'll say I have a folder prepared called sounds, and I have these 6 wave files in here. I also have another folder in there with some more wave files that I'll talk about later. I just wanted to show how you can switch between kits, but we'll get to that way down the road. For now, to do what I'm doing, you'll need to get 6 wave files of these sounds. I used a free online download that I'll leave a link to. Hopefully I remember to put in the video right here. If not, I'll make sure there's a link to the website in the comments below. And hopefully I talked about in the intro of this video as well. Tons of free sound kits on there, so you can download one that works for you just to be able to follow along with this. Or honestly, you can make the noises with your mouth and record them, but you will want to use wave files. MP3s have some issues with Mixer, and they don't work as well in my experience. Okay, so just make sure you've got this sounds folder and a clap, a crash, a hi-hat, a kick, a snare, and a tom if you want to follow along directly. And I'm just going to make this little area that I'll say load in sounds. Okay, now we'll start with the hi-hat, and we will set that equal to Mixer. So remember, we called pygame.mixer right in the beginning. We imported it. Now we're going to use it, and to do that, we set up this mixer.sound. And then all we have to do is give it the file it lives in. So sounds and then \, and I just called it hi-hat.wave. Okay. So just like this, and we're going to copy that, and we're going to make 6 of them here. So we'll say hi-hat, and then snare, snare, and then we'll call it kick, and then we'll call crash, and then clap, and then tom. Okay, and then in the sounds locations, we'll do snare, hi-hat, kick. Make sure that your names match up exactly to what the actual files say over here. I always recommend if they don't download as something pretty logical, consider renaming them to something that's a little easier, a little more logical. Okay, but just like this, and if you do have a T or a special character that looks like an escape character, like a \n for any reason, just make sure to do this double \, because this is basically what you need to do to get a \ interpreted as a literal in your string. You don't have to worry about that too much, but if you do get anything funky where it like thinks it's an escape character, just do those double \, and that should work for you. Okay, so now we're going to come down to where we did draw grid, and we're going to put in something that's going to use that beat changed functionality. And so every time the beat changes, we want to play the notes. So for iron range, I just want to make sure I put it in a good spot. Screens for iron range instruments, draw the line down in here. Boxes, draw the grid. Okay. So what we want to do is say if beat changed, and then so if the beat changed, we'll call this function play notes, and this is just going to play the sounds that we just created based on the beat changing, and then immediately we're going to set beat changed equal to false. So this is how, even though this code, the outside code, this while loop runs 60 times every second, this loop only runs once per time that the beat changes, and that's how we control total number of times that the beat, that the sounds get played. So that's that. Now let's go above draw grid. And let's define the play notes function since the sounds are right here. So we'll say define play notes. And this one's pretty easy. It's just for I in range, and then the length of our clicked list. If clicked at I, and then the active beat. So that's all we have to check is if clicked at I, which is going to check each row, so each instrument in our clicked list, at the active beat. If it's selected as a 1, then we're just going to check what I is equal to and then play a different sound based off of that. So if I is equal to 0, we want that sound that we created, just do hi-hat dot play, just like that. That's the whole thing you have to do. And then we'll do Control C, Control V. And even though this one is a little bit, monotonous, I would say it's not too bad. And probably outside of putting these sounds in a list, and then referring to a specific item index of the list, there's probably not a faster way to do this, other than just going through and making sure you've got the order right for your stuff. Crash, and then clap, and then tom. Actually, I'm not sure that's how we drew it. Is it hi-hat, snare, kick, crash, clap, and then tom? I think, okay, that is, yeah. If I is equal to 5, then we'll do tom.play. And this right here, what we just set up, super fast, super easy, is all you have to do to get the sounds playing, or it should be. Okay, so let's go ahead and just load this in and see if we can get just some sounds. I'll try this hi-hat. Okay, and I'm really hoping I left sound on recording the computer here. So hopefully you can hear that hi-hat going if you're following along. Hopefully you're getting this now. Let's play it. Okay. All right, maybe it's just me, but I think the fact that we're here already is super cool. And you can turn stuff on, you can turn stuff off. And try playing around with your different sounds. Once you get to this point, all right, it's so addictive. I could stay right there forever. Once you get to that point, that's a really good time to check that the sounds that you imported are actually the sounds that you're hoping to get, because you can change those sounds down the road for sure. But that's kind of your first way of knowing whether or not you have sounds that you're going to be happy with going forward. Okay, so there is one thing that I would like to do on the mixer, and it's because the default for your mixer, the default for that when you load it in from Pygame, is it has a total of what's called 8 channels that it can play on. So 8 total sounds technically that could be ongoing. But some of those wave files, like the crash symbol, actually take a couple loops to finish. So in theory, you could run into this problem where you run out of sounds, and so it has to pick what sound it should let you play, because its default is to only have 8. The way to get around that is super easy. You just do pygame.mixer.set num channels, and then I think general rule of thumb is that the number of instruments, if you give them each 3 channels, there should be no issues here, regardless of how fast you start playing, unless you're up to like 600 beats per minute. Then maybe you need to beef this up. But the reason that 8 is the default is because in general, if like you have a video game going and you have more than 8 sound effects at once, it's just chaos. But like for a soundboard, as long as you're picking sounds that sound okay together, having a lot more channels is okay. So you could do instruments times 4 if you really wanted. Instruments times 3 has worked fine for me in the past, so we're going to go with that. Okay? So that's pretty cool. I think we're kind of at the point we want to start adding some player functionality to this. So like, let's do play pause, because that should be an easy one. And then we'll start doing it to where you can add more beats, and you can add more beats per minute or subtract beats per minute. And then we'll add the functionality to be able to turn on or off a specific channel. And then we'll start looking at the ability to save and load files, which is it's a lot that we got going ahead of us. So let's just soldier on. If you are enjoying this video, I think you've made it this far already. Let me just say, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. It would mean a ton to me. I hope you've been enjoying the content. I try to roll out high quality content like this all the time, and the support means a lot. If you have any questions about what you're seeing or want to see something specific in the future, be sure to leave a comment letting me know about it. Without any further ado, let's soldier on. Okay, so let's do a play pause button, and we'll just come down below draw grid, and we'll just add a rectangle that we're going to draw right down here. I think it's easier than drawing it on the I think it's easier than drawing it in the grid, but if you disagree with me, that's fine. Just draw it wherever you want. So I'll say lower menu buttons, and I'm going to create a little section in my code for this now. And I will just call this button the play pause button, and I will say pygame.draw.rect. I'll put it on the screen, and I will make it gray because it's on a black background, so gray will look pretty good. I'll move it off from the left by 50, and then I'm gonna raise it up from the bottom by 150, so it's still squarely within that menu. And they'll make it 200 wide and 100 tall, and that should be a good button looking object. We'll make it solid, and I'll make it a rounded rectangle, which is kind of normal for buttons. And I will just, let's do some text too. Just let everybody know. So I'll say play text, and we will set it equal to the label font dot render, and let's give it the text of play/pause, and let's make it true, and let's make the text white, and let's put it on the screen. So screen.blit play text, and then let's put it inside that button by a bit. So 70, and then height minus 130. So it should be pretty close to dead on to the middle of the button. And now let's add a little check to whether or not we're playing or not. So if we are playing, then we'll have play text 2 here. So let's do a new font. I'll call it medium font because it's not exactly going to be small, but we are going to come up to where we defined our font the first time, and let's create a new font, medium font, and it's going to be the same. It's just going to be smaller because I've got this button that's going to say play/pause on it. I'd like to say underneath it whether we're paused or playing. So I don't want it to be small. I want it to be super easy to read, but it shouldn't be the feature of the button. So I'll just make it 24. We'll see how that looks, and maybe we play around with it later. Okay, but yeah, so we'll say, all right, playing text equals medium font dot render, and then it is going to say playing if we are playing. Playing true, and we'll make this one. I'm still inside the string. Anti-alias true, and let's get a new shade of gray in our kind of colors library up top. And in general, the closer to black your gray is, the darker it's getting. So we have this regular gray. I'll say dark gray, and it's going to be just 50, 50, 50. So black is 0, 0, 0. That kind of light normal gray we have is 128, 128, 128. So the lower the numbers on your gray, closer to black, higher numbers, lighter. Just neat little gray tidbit for you. Okay. So we'll say play text is equal to playing if we are active, and we'll say that it is equal to, so we don't need if playing, this is just else now, else it'll be equal to paused. Alrighty, and let's see, let's put it on the screen, and let's put it underneath. So we'll take this screen.blit, Control C, and right there, and let's put it height minus 130. Let's put 30 pixels lower on the screen, so height minus 100. Now it'll be 100 pixels off of the bottom of the screen, and it'll say playing or paused, but right now we're not actually handling whether or not it's been clicked. So let's figure that out here. We want to do inside of our mouse button clicking code, let's add a second section for click up. So in general, if you want something to only happen once, then it's usually a better idea to do pygame.mouseButtonUp, because if you're holding the button down, then it could technically like do it multiple times, and you don't really want to mess with that. So we'll go to if event.type equals pygame.mouseButtonUp, and we'll say if play pause dot, and I'm not going to get it wrong this time, collide point. There we go. Collide point with event.pause and playing. So the reason we need the and playing is because if it is playing, then we need playing to be set equal to false. And actually, what's probably a better way of doing this is rather than and playing there, we'll do if playing in here, playing equals false. and then we'll say L if not playing. And the reason you don't just want to do else here is because if it was playing, you would come through and then it would be not playing. And then we'd say else, and then it would see that it's not playing and immediately set back equal to playing. So you need to do an L if you do it this way. L if playing equals true. And that should do it. So we already have the active length like checker stops if we're playing. So let's see if our pause button works. Oh boy. Play pause. I don't think I updated the text. Okay, hang on a second. Play text, medium font dot render. Right here. This is play text 2, not just play text. There we go. All right, that looks sweet. We've got playing down there. I pause it. You can see our blue rectangle stops, and then it keeps going. I think that's great. Okay, so let's see if I pause it and then I set up a beat. And I'm just doing kind of a generic rock beat, and we'll end with a crash. Pause it. And let's add some floor toms because those are cool. Pause. Okay, sweet. So that's awesome. I think that's a great start. I think maybe the next thing we should do is make it to where you can add more beats and more BPMs. So that's kind of that's going to be kind of complicated, but just bear with me because I think we've created a really useful backbone for this project where actually everything is going to scale really well. We just have to implement it and we have to be careful about getting all the details right. Okay, so let's go ahead next, and I think let's add the BPM stuff. So we have lower menu buttons. We're in this, we're still in this section for sure, lower menu buttons, and we'll do BPM stuff here. And I just find it helps to split it up with those comments a little bit. And so first thing we'll do is we'll make a BPM rectangle pygame.draw.rect, and we'll put it on the screen. Rect. We'll put it on the screen. We'll make it gray. And we will use more or less the same size rectangle. So for this one, we'll make it 300 to get it 50 pixels away from the last one, but it'll still be height minus 150. We'll still make it 200 wide, and we'll still make it 100 high. And we will still make it solid. No, you know what? Because this one is not a button, let's make this one hollow. This one is just displaying how many beats per minute, and then the beat per minute add and subtract buttons will be to the right of it. So let's make this one hollow, and then add some text we'll call BPM text, and that will be the label font now. No, we better not do label font because it's a lot of text actually. So medium font.render, and then we're going to spell out beats per minute. There we go. Okay, and let's put it on the screen. True, white, and then put it on the screen.blit, and this is going to be the BPM text. And then for position, we don't want to move this one in too much because beats per minute is kind of long. So we'll do 308 just to get in by a little bit, but we'll still do the height minus 130, just like that. And then what we'll do is we'll do a second text that's actually going to show BPM text 2. And that's going to be the label font because that can be big. This is going to show the actual beats per minute, so not just the text telling you what it is. So this will be label font.render. And then you could make this a formatted string if you wanted to, if for some reason you wanted to add anything other than the beats per minute variable. I'll do it that way just to show it could be done. So in theory, you could say like BPM : and then BPM if you wanted to. But I'm going to put this below the beats per minute text. And again, true, and we'll make it white. And let's put this on the screen.blit, BPM text 2. And let's put it just underneath. So what would make the most sense? Probably 370. 370, and then I'd say that height minus 100 maybe, where we put the last second line of text. Let's just see how that works. And let's check this out. So beats per minute's 240. I'm a little surprised because I thought I was drawing a rectangle there. BPM rect screen gray 300. Oh, I did height minus 1500. We want height minus 150. Yeah, that looks a little better. Okay, so that's cool, but we can't adjust it yet. Can pause it. It's still, I just think what we've done so far is really cool, so sorry if I enjoy it. This is like the most fun project I've ever made. Okay, so beats per minute's 240, but we can't adjust it yet. So that we're able to do that, let's go ahead and add 2 more rectangles. And this might not seem like the easiest way to do it, but I actually think this is a pretty logical way of doing it, because in general, you're not adjusting beats per minute by 1 at a time. If you want to, by all means, make these plus and minus 1s. I'm going to make them plus and minus 5s, because most of the time you see speed beats per minute adjusted in increments of 10 or occasionally 5. It's really weird to see a song that's in like 137 beats per minute. It's much more normal to have 120, 240. So I'm just going to do it in plus minus 5s, but you don't have to. Just driving a motorcycle down the street scared me a little. Okay, BPM add rect. So this will be the rectangle they'll let you do plus 5. And we'll say pygame.draw.rect. We'll put it on the screen. We'll make it gray. And this time, let's go a little bit to the right. So that last rectangle we made started at 300 and at 500. This one will just give it a padding of 10. And then we'll put it at height minus 150, so the height of the top of the rectangle. And we'll just make this one 48, 48, almost 50, 50, to where it'll almost, these 2 rectangles will almost fill the full height, but not quite. I just think everything looks a little better with some padding around it. And then we'll say BPM sub rect. So this will be the button that lets you subtract 5 from your beats per minute. And we'll do pygame.rect, put it on the screen, make it gray. Now this one, still at 510, we want it at the same height, or we want it at the same X position, but then we'll just do height minus 100. And now since they're 48, 48, we have a little bit of padding, which will be nice, as you'll see when we load it in. And I really want to emphasize the style stuff. You can do whatever you want with yours. So if you don't like the way mine looks, or you think it would look better in some other way, tweak it. Change how big fonts are, change your font, change your colors, do whatever you want. I'm just trying to give you the functionality. Okay, so then what we'll do is we'll create some add text, and this will be kind of nice because we can use it on the beats per minute buttons. And I guess in theory we'll want to do just plus and minus 1s for the beats text. So I forget what I was about to say. Okay, add text is medium font dot render, because these are smaller buttons, so we can't afford to make them huge. And we'll do plus 5 for add text true and white. And then subtext, nice, that's a thing, medium font dot render, and then in string variable -5 true and white. And then let's do screen.blit for add text, and let's put that a little inside, so 520, because the button starts at 510, and then height minus 140, so a little bit down. So we're giving it kind of a bracket of 10 on the top and the left, and we'll see how that looks. And we'll do about the same thing for the subtext, so 520 and then height minus 90. There we go. All right, and we haven't had any functionality, so nothing happens if you click it right now, but let's see if that looks good. Yep. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to make it to where when you click that button, it actually adjusts your BPM by plus or minus 5. And that is not hard to do. So we'll come down into our mouse button up code, where we check if the play pause button gets, wow, that was hard for me to get out, if the play pause button gets pressed, and we'll do if add BPM add rect dot collide point event dot pause. And so if that's the case, then we just want BPM plus equal 5, and then we'll do an elif BPM subrect dot collide point event dot pause BPM minus equals 5. And actually, we can make our code slightly more optimized by making these all elifs, because in theory, we know that these buttons are not in the same spot. So we can save our code a little bit of time by not bothering to check if you click these other buttons, if you already clicked this button in this loop, because you're not going to be doing both. And that's super simple. That should be all we have to do. So let's go ahead and check it out. Let's see. I'll go ahead and put some sound in here. Boom, boom, ch, boom, ch, boom, boom, ch. And let's see if we can make it faster. Yeah, it's giving me anxiety now. Okay, but hopefully if you're following along, that's really cool. That should be like super encouraging. You just made this happen. You are a programming king. Good work. Keep it up. Maybe I'm just talking to myself, but I think you're enjoying it too. All right, so the next thing we have to do is we have to add beats, and that is going to be a little bit trickier because we have to obviously update our clicked and update our total grid. So we have a few lists that have to get updated if we change how many beats are in the song. But we can start basically with the BPM stuff that we just made. So we'll say beats stuff. So, you know, yes, there's a little more programming we have to do on the back end, but at least to get the rectangles drawn, it is not going to be too bad at all. So we have beats rect, beats text, beats text, beats text 2 even, because it really is, it's a second version of the BPM, something that you should have control over. We want them to be able to add and subtract. So we'll say add text 2, subtext 2, add text 2, subtext 2, and we'll do one beat at a time, because technically you could have any time signature. You could do 9 beats total if you really want to. So we'll say beats in loop. And this time we are currently, our right limit, I guess, is 560, right? So would it make the most sense to start this at 600? Probably. So we'll do 600, and then everything else I think is fine. This will be 608, 670, and then this one should probably now be 810, 810, 820, 820. And we haven't added anything for operational code yet, so nothing happens when we click these buttons, but that looks good. Let's move the text to the right, because this is not as long. So beats in loop can be like 618, and this can be like 680. I think that'll look good. Yeah, that looks better. All right, moving on. The actual functionality that we need when we click these buttons is a little bit more complicated. So let's take a look at what we need to do when we collide with the points. All right, so we'll come down to these two, BPM, add rect, and subrect, and we need to do an elif beats add rect collide point, and elif beats. And initially, we can kind of use the same code because we are going to take the beats variable that already existed, and we're going to add one and subtract one. But that is not enough right there, because we have to add a full row, a full empty row to our grid if it was, let me make sure I say this right, a full empty row to our grid if we add a beat, and we need to remove the last row in our grid if we subtract a beat. So what we need to do is say for I in range length of clicked. Length of clicked. There we go. We need to remove, oh wait, this is the +1. So I am gonna steal this. There we go. And so this means we've just pressed beats -1. And what we need to do is we need to say for I in range length of clicked at I. So this is going through each row of our clicked list, and we are going to clicked I dot pop which is the Python list function for removal, and we're going to pop the -1, which means the last character on the end. So there's this way you can address, this is the index inside that list, and if you do a negative, it's counting back from the end of your list. So pop -1, this is going to go through and remove the last item in our list for the clicked list. And then for the beats +1, we go through and we do essentially the same thing. So actually I was on the right track already. Except instead of pop -1, it's actually kind of fun. It's append, and it's still a -1 because -1 means not selected. So this is now everything. So I think this is going to make, let's see, fingers crossed. So we hit +1 and now we have 9 on the screen. How cool is that? And the entire screen updates every time we add one. So now we can go ahead and do 12 beats. I'm going to pause it while I set this up. So bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, bass, snare, crash. Yeah. And this, I mean, you can play around with it already if you want, but this can keep going. You can make this thing 48 right here. You will notice it's a little bit tedious to fill in 48 beats, but we set it up in a really smart way so that this is completely adjustable based on how many beats you want in your loop. So, I mean, awesome job, guys. We are just cruising along here. Let's add some more functionality because this is going really well. Let's add the ability to turn off a channel so that you can edit it without it affecting your live loop, and turn it on and off just like that. So to do that, we are going to come up and we are going to create some instrument rectangles. So essentially, they are just, let's go down here underneath the beat stuff, and we'll say instrument rects. And I'm just doing this so that we can click on the channels. And we'll say instrument rects equals, and then a empty list, and then for I in range instruments. And I'm trying to make it so that if you copy this code and then later on you want to add some more channels, I'm trying to make it as scalable to that automatically as possible. So we'll make this little rect equal to pygame.rect.rect. And you'll notice what I'm doing now is I'm defining a rectangle, but I'm not drawing it on the screen because we don't need it on the screen. And for this one, it's a little different. We're just defining a rectangle, and so this one needs 2 tuples instead of a list of 4 characteristics. It needs an X and Y starting position, and so X and Y starting position will always be 0, and then I times 100. So just as we go through the list, it's going down 100 at a time, but it's staying all the way on the left. And then the width for all of these was 200, and they're all 100 high. And then we're going to do instrument rects.append and that rectangle. Okay, so what we're doing is every loop we're coming through and we're creating this list of rectangles for those buttons, but we're doing that so that we can come down in our collision detection inside of our mouse button up clicking, and we can check if any instrument rectangle was clicked super easily. So to do that, we'll say if we will say for I in range length of instrument rectangles. Okay, so this is going to check every instrument rectangle that we define, and what we're going to say is if instrument rects, sorry, I try to give my variable names long descriptive names so that as you guys are following along, it's pretty clear what everything is, but these are maybe longer than you would want to use in an optimal project. But so we're going to check if every rectangle in there was clicked. We'll say if instrument rects.collide point with event.position. Then what we'll do now is we're going to create a new list, and I'll call it active list. And we will set whatever instrument was clicked, so whatever is at active list I times equals -1. And so we're going to use the same kind of logic we had in our clicked list for our active list, but this is going to be a little simpler because it's not really an array. It doesn't need to be a list of lists. So we'll go down to clicked, and right underneath clicked, I will make another list called active list. You could call it active channels, active instruments, whatever. And in the beginning, I'm going to set them all equal to true because I actually think our default will be having all of your instruments on, and it's just going to be 1 for underscore in range of instruments. Okay, and this is just going to give us a list of 6 ones saying all the channels initially will be on, but if you click on a channel, it'll turn off. And where we'll update that is we'll go into our draw grid function and we'll pass in that active list. So we'll say actives down here, and we'll give them the active list. And now actives. So you remember this colors, gray, white, gray that I made before? I would like the text of each instrument to be the color of its active list position. So essentially, if you click on it, then I want it to be a 1, meaning it's active, or a -1, which is actually going to be gray, because remember, a -1 is the last item in a list. So I just think that's a clever way to do. Now hi-hat text is going to be colors 0. Wait a second. Colors, no, actives 0. Okay, so let me be super thorough to explain this item, because now it's a little confusing. We're referencing an index item of a list in a list. But actives 0 is telling us whether or not we currently want hi-hat to be active, right? So this is going to be a 1 or a -1 depending on whether or not hi-hat is on. And so if it's a 1, we want it to be white. If it's a -1, we want it to be gray. So now we just do this exact colors logic that we did here for all 6 instruments, and we just make sure we update their index location. And as soon as I do this, I will load it up and show you what we're doing. So 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, if you need extra clarification on anything we do in this, just let me know about it in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So if I click hi-hat, you can see it turns gray, which is great. If I click snare, it turns gray. Bass drum, I can sort of make these inactive. But what does that mean for the actual code? And so we need to come into our play notes function because it's going to impact it in here as well. So what we need is if clicked I is equal to active beat, and we need to check and active list at I is equal to +1. Okay, so this is all we have to do now, because when we check and see, oh, it's time to play the hi-hat because in my beat that I've set up, it's a 1. Well, we checked and saw that actually hi-hat is turned off, so it is not time to play the hi-hat. And it'll work that way for all of them. So that's all we have to do there, but it's still going to look bright green on the screen, and so it might be a little confusing why it's not playing. Maybe you didn't notice the text was dark gray. So let's also, in the grid, I think I like this idea. We'll go up to in here where we check the colors. So if it's not selected, it should be that light gray, that basic gray already. But then what we'll do is inside of this else statement, we'll check if actives at J now. It's actually J is the beat for this loop. So hopefully that's not confusing for you, but maybe it is. This is checking what instrument. So if our active instrument is positive, then the color should be green. There we go. Oop, there we go. Okay. But if the actives J, actually we can just do an else here. So we checked to see if it was a 1. If not, then we'll want our color to be equal to dark gray. Dark gray. There we go. So now let me explain what we just did, but make sure that you're following along, and hopefully I didn't confuse you too much. So let's say you have a hi-hat playing every beat in your loop, and then you want to add some bass. but then you want to kind of see what it sounds like without the hi-hat in it. Okay, you can turn just that channel off and you see the squares go dark gray, but what's cool is that still gives you the ability to edit it, so you could still be working on your beat and then turn it on. So like, let's say I want to add some crash and some clap. I don't know what these are going to sound like. This could be wacky, but now I could turn all this stuff back on at any time, and then you get this whole kind of funky beat. Actually, that doesn't sound too bad. And then I'm going to turn the bass and the floor toms off, and we have individual channel control. So that's really cool. That's another cool feature that like a standard drum pad would be able to do for you. So, okay, we have play pause, we have beats per minute, we have beats in the loop, we have all of the ability to add beats, add speed, add a hi-hat, or turn off individual channels, things like that. We've looked at how to load in the music. So I think we're getting to the point where we need to work with an external file to be able to load and save specific beats that we've created. So we're going to do that next, but I need a quick water break. Okay, so the next thing I want to do to our app here is I would like to add a save menu and a load menu. And I'm going to put them on two different menus because I think that kind of helps separate out the functionality. But you could probably put all of this on one. That's just up to you. But let's get into it. Okay, so let's start by just drawing the rectangles, because from there we'll start building out how this actually needs to work. So let's come down to where we draw everything, and we have so many rectangles and beats and instrument rectangles all getting drawn. Next thing we'll do is save and load stuff. Okay. And we can pretty much use the same rectangles that we've been using in the whole menu because there's nothing wrong with them. They look just fine. So we will say save button equals, and that'll be pygame.draw.rect, screen, gray. And now we need to make sure we keep moving them to the right. So that'll be this one we'll put at 900. And we'll put height minus 150. And actually, I think it'd look cool maybe if these were one over the other. So height minus 150 and then 200 wide. And we'll only make it 48 high, kind of like the plus and minus buttons, because we'll do save above load, and we'll just see how that looks. So 0 and 5, and then we'll do load button just underneath it. So I'm going to copy the same button. Equals, Control V, and then minus 100, and everything else is the same. Yeah, those buttons look pretty good. Let's put text on them now. So I'll grab, actually, I think these maybe can be label font. I think that'll be all right. So we'll say save text equals, and it'll be label font dot render. Should be pro at this by now. And we'll just say save beat, and we'll make it true, and we'll make it white. Whoop, gotta spell things right. True and white, and I will take this whole thing, save text, and we'll do the same thing for load. Load text, load beat, true and white, and then we need to put them on the screen. So screen.blit, and this one we want to do save text, and we would like to put it just a little inside the button, so 920 and height minus 140, and that should give us a nice fairly square in the center of our button kind of thing. And then we will do screen.blit load text, and then this can be 920 as well, and then minus 90. And let's see, again, we're not pressing those buttons yet, but yeah, the text looks good. You can play around with the spacing if you want. They're on the buttons, so what more do you want from me, you guys? Okay, save beat, load beat. And the reason I put them one over another is I want to add another button once we're done with this that's clear board. So like, let's say you've filled in like this whole board with squares and you totally regret it and you just want to scrap it and start over. Rather than closing the program and then opening it back up, we'll just do a clear board functionality. So Actually, that's going to be easier than the save and load. So why don't we just do that right now? We'll do like clear board, because that's going to be like 3 lines of code. So clear board, we're going to add clear button, and it's going to be same button. Actually, I'm just going to copy all these because it's just going to have text as well. Pygame.draw.rect screen, and then we'll want this 900. It's 200 wide, so we'll want it at like 1150. Does that make sense? 1150. And height, and this one can be the full 100 high, I would think. And then this text will have it say clear board. Okay, clear board. And then we'll put it at 1160 and height minus 130. Let's try that. 1160, height minus 130, and this will be clear text and clear text. All right, so let's see if that looks okay. I would like to move that down some. Height minus 120. That'll look better. Yep. Okay, let's do the clear board real quick, because clear is way easier than save and load. Save and load is going to be a lot of dealing with external files, and I think just this is going to be a little faster. So let's go ahead and check if the clear button collides with the point. So we'll come down to our elifs because it fits nicely in here, and we'll say elif clear button dot collide point event dot pause. So if you've hit the clear button, then actually what we're going to do is we're just going to set the clicked list equal to what it is in the very beginning. So, you know, we check how many instruments and how many beats, and we just set them all equal to -1. Well, we can just come under our clear button and do the exact same thing. And so that is really it. All right, let's check that out real quick. So we've got a whole bunch of hi-hats and some, there we go, just a random terrible button. You're like, oh, what have I done? Clear the board. You're empty. You're free. There you go. Okay, so we had clear functionality. That's sweet. Good job. Now let's do the save and load. And I want to do it where save and load will actually kind of stop playing the music, and it will kind of make it to where you can't click the rest of these buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 new variables called save menu and load menu. And we're going to use those kind of similar to playing to see like if something is currently true. So up by beat changed, I'm going to say save menu, and it'll be equal to false when the game starts, and so will load menu. They'll both be equal to false right in the beginning. But one thing we are going to do in the beginning as well, and you'll want to do this, you'll want to drop an empty text file into your Pygame project. So if you need to make one in the outside world and drop it in, that's fine. But if you have a decent IDE, you can do new file and then just call it like mybeats or whatever .txt. I already have one called savedbeats.txt. And to say like, hey, we're going to be using this inside of this program, then you want to start early in your function and just do file equals open, and then saved beats or whatever the name of your text file is .txt, and then comma. And then since in the very beginning we want to read the data in, so let's say you close down your session and 2 days later you come back and you want to do a new session. You want to read all of the information that's in there currently, and we'll do it kind of like a CSV or comma separated values file, where each line in the file will be all the information we need for one beat. So it's going to be how many beats are in it, how many BPMs, what name did we give it, and then the clicked list of that guy. So we'll do for line in file, the file that you have, and we'll make a list called saved beats dot append, and then that line. Okay. And saved beats doesn't yet exist, so right above file, let's just do saved beats is an empty list to start. Okay, and since right now we don't have any saved beats, it's just going to be an empty variable until we do save some stuff later on. But this is how you open up and store the data from a file initially. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and use save menu and load menu now. If we come down to our buttons, and the first thing we're going to do is check to see if you've clicked on a button. So if you click on save menu or you click on load menu, and one thing that we're going to add to all of the mouse button logic so far is we are going to say if mouse button up and not save menu and not load menu, because technically everything is going to be there even after we load in a new screen that's going to be covering it up. So we just want to make it to where you don't have to worry about clicking the buttons on the underneath after we've created a new menu. So all of that's great. And then kind of the counter to this is once we have save menu or load menu up, we need to make sure the buttons in there can be pressed. And we'll do that by adding a new line that's going to be so Pygame mouse button up and save menu, or and load menu. And we'll do that a little bit later. Okay. So let's get down to business. And not save menu and not load menu. And then we'll want some elifs in here, checking if save menu or load menu were clicked. So elif save menu, save button dot collide point with event dot position. Then we want save menu to be equal to true. And then we'll say elif load menu dot collide point at event dot pause. Then we want load menu to be equal to true. And we don't want to run this code just yet because it'll disable all of our buttons and we won't be able to do anything but close it. But this is going to make it to where our save menu and our load menu do get opened up. And when we're loading in, I think, yeah, we'll just leave it like that for now. So what I mean when I say we need to kind of take this exact same code, but we're going to need to do some different stuff with it, is we're going to use this menu. So we'll say elif now because we don't want to run this if save menu and load menu are false. But we'll say elif event.type Pygame mouse button up, and we'll just say we're going to create an exit button. So we'll say if exit button dot collide point event dot position, and we'll use an exit button on both the save menu and the load menu just to get out of it. So even before we actually set up the functionality of saving and loading, we just want to have the ability to enter a menu and then exit a menu. Okay, and we'll just make sure that playing is equal to true when you get out of the menu, just on the off chance it pauses. It shouldn't, because we don't have it set up that way, but just now we have it. Okay. So we're not doing anything with save menu or load menu yet, but we want to. So let's come up to our other functions where we draw stuff, screen.fill, boxes. Yeah, and so we want to do before even the box is getting drawn. So screen.fill is the only thing that's happened yet. And we'll say if save menu, then we'll do a function called draw save menu. And then we'll say same thing, if load menu, then we'll say draw load menu. And just so I don't forget, we want to make sure we get the exit button back from both of these. Exit button equals draw load menu, draw save menu. Okay? And that's really what we have to do. We have to think about this in order of what's the bare minimum we have to do to get these menus going. And then we can start adding the actual functionality to them, okay? So let's take a look at, it doesn't really matter which one we start with. They'll be sort of similar in format. So we'll come down just below our draw grid and we'll do draw save menu first. So draw def, whoop, boy, I'm having some trouble typing. Def draw save menu. Okay. And we just have to make sure we return an exit button before anything else. Let's just make sure we don't forget that. Okay. And let's just put that on the screen first. So we'll do exit button. And let's not call it exit button because we use that so many places. Let's do exit btn just to separate it out. And we'll say exit btn is going to be equal to that pygame.draw.rect. And we'll put it on the screen. We'll make it gray because all of our buttons are gray. And for X position, let's put it at very far over to the right. So width minus 200. Let's do width minus 200 and height minus 100. And then for width, let's make 180 so it doesn't quite touch the right side, and 90 so it doesn't quite touch the bottom. And then we'll make it a solid rectangle with rounded rectangle edges of 5, just like we always do. And let's make some exit text here that's going to say close menu in label font. So label font.render. And it'll just say close and true and white. Let's do that. And then screen.blit. Exit text. And we want it, what do we want for the coordinates for this guy? We'll put it width minus 160. So we want it inside that button. Width minus 160 and height minus 70. That'll do. A little bit of cushion there. And let's see, I'm basically going to copy this entire thing for draw load menu, just so initially, draw load menu. So initially we have the ability to just test out opening up those two windows. But we do actually, you'll see, this is going to be a little weird if we don't do another step. So let's say we're saving the beat. Okay, we're in some menu now. But we haven't done anything that's going to make it feel like a menu. So, bool has no object. Load menu.collide point. Whoop. This, what did I do? Exit button. Oh, I did load menu instead of load button. You goofy goof, Pete. There you go. Okay, alrighty. So, one thing I want to say, we want to draw a rectangle that's basically the full screen. So pygame.draw.rect, put it on the screen, make it black, and make it the size of the entire rectangle. So start at 0, 0, make it the full width and height, and no rounding, no edges. We want it to be solid. And make that the first thing you draw on your menu, and do it for both. So what you'll see now, if I hit save beat, well, you'll see nothing because I did something wrong. Let's take a look. Oh. So it's not working because I put these way too early. You want these menus to kind of be the last thing that you draw. So after everything else is getting drawn, so after the clear button, after everything, we want the drawing of these menus if the menus are selected. And the reason for that is this code is drawing things in this specific order. So the last thing it's doing is right at the bottom, checking if you have a menu active or not. So we have this ability now to go into the load menu and the save menu, just like that. Okay, and to kind of illustrate what else we could do is we could say while we're in these menus, we can pause the stuff. So the buttons aren't doing anything, but that music is still playing. And if that bothers you, then super easy thing to do would just be set playing equal to false while the menus are active. I actually think it might make sense to have it still active while we're in there, because if you're saving a beat, maybe you want to be hearing it to think of what a good name for it would be. But okay, this is good. The important thing was that we were getting those menus to work, because now those menus are blank slates that we can open up and do our work in. So we can kind of stop messing with the main loop, which is getting pretty gummed up. So we'll start by just working in these menus. And so to start with the draw saved menu, let's do draw save because it's a little bit simpler. Drawing the loading menu, we have to kind of sort through everything that's been saved, and that can take a little while. So let's start here. We have the full rectangle. Let's call this menu text, and we'll just kind of tell them what they're doing on the screen. So we'll say render, and we'll say save menu, enter a name for current beat. Okay. And we'll make it true as always, white as always, screen.blit as always, and let's put the menu text, and let's pick a good spot for it. How about 440? And let's see what that looks like. So save menu, enter a name for current beat. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So that's cool, but we haven't really done anything yet. We've just got that going on. So next, let's put a button down before we worry too much about the typing space. Let's put a save button on the screen. So we'll call it saving button because there's already a save button. So that's maybe a little confusing, but that's what we're doing. Okay, Pygame.draw.rect, and we're putting it on the screen, and we're going to make it gray because that's what we do with buttons, and we'll put it sort of in, we're making it fray. We'll put it pretty much in the middle of the screen, so we'll do width, width divided by 2, floor divided by 2, and then we'll do minus 200. So this will be a real wide one. We'll put it height times 0.75. So we'll put it at 3/4 of the way down the screen, but we'll make it 400 wide and 100 tall because it's a big button. It's kind of the whole purpose of being on the screen. So we'll make it a bigger button. Saving button, and then we'll do saving text, saving txt. And that will be label font.render, and this will have the text be save beat, and true, and white, and screen.blit, saving text, and we want to put it at about the same spot, so around width divided by 2, maybe minus 50 this time, because let's say it's 100 wide, maybe, I'm guessing, and that could be a good spot for it. And then we'll do height times 0.75, and then we'll do plus 10, 20, 30. We'll put it in the middle of the button, 30. And that should give us a big old button that says save on the saving screen. Save beat. Yeah, we want to move that to the left a little bit. Okay, but we've got the button on there, which is important. And let's move it minus 70. I don't know. I'm winging it here. Save beat. That's pretty good. Okay, so we've got the save beat. And now, one thing, we're already returning the exit button, but we also want to return the saving button because we are going to check if we collide with it in the outside world. So go down to where you are drawing your save menu, and we'll do exit button and saving button, and we'll use that later to check whether or not we're saving the beat. Alrighty, and now we'll want to pass in a few things into this. Actually, we're going to want to check the current beat name because we're going to be typing in to save a name, and then we're going to want to check whether or not we're actively typing. So, yeah, it's not happy because those are not yet variables, but we'll come up here. And we're going to make these new variables. We're going to make beat name, and it'll just be an empty string initially. And we'll make a new variable typing, which initially will be false. And then if we come up into our draw save menu, then you'll see we now are passing in beat name, and we're passing in the typing variable. And so to do this, we're going to make a new entry box in the middle of the screen. And so we'll call it, doesn't really matter where we put it, we'll call it the entry rectangle, so entry rect, and that'll be equal to pygame.draw.rect, and we'll put it on the screen, and we'll make it dark gray, and we will, let's just make it regular gray, because we'll use dark gray to signify whether or not it's been clicked. Okay, so screen gray, and then let's just put it at 400, 200, 600, 200. All right. So it'll be the middle 600 pixels of the screen. 200 will get down from the top by a little bit. And we'll make this sucker 5 by 5. So there'll just be this big empty rectangle. And then we're going to have the entry text, which is going to be basically telling us what we've currently typed in. So label font.render, f-string of beat name, and there we go, true and white. And we're going to want to blit that, screen.blit the entry text, and we're going to want to put it right inside that variable, that rectangle. Okay, and we need to return the entry rectangle as well, because we need to be able to click on it and determine whether or not we're actively typing or not. And I believe that's all we'll need. Okay, so now let's go back down to where we call that and make sure that we're passing the entry rectangle back. So unresolved draw save menu. Did I accidentally change the name of the draw save menu? Beat name. And typing, I'm sure I put another, oh yeah, I put a semicolon in there. I'm such a silly goose. Okay. Entry rectangle. All right, so let's do something with these buttons. I'll show you what it looks like now. You should be running it on your own as well. And you see we've got this nice rectangle in the middle where while we're typing a beat name, it'll load in. So let's go ahead and close, and let's do something with all these buttons that we've got. So now we have to go down and check what to do if all these different things get clicked. Okay, so we are in this section now, this elif type Pygame mouse button up, where we have the exit buttons, obviously to kind of reset everything, and we'll clear out the beat name. So if you were halfway through typing a beat name and then you close the menu, we'll set it equal to empty. And if you were typing, we'll set that back equal to false, because now you're obviously not typing. All right, and so let's start taking a look at the things that we just defined and in the menu and what we want them to do. So if you click the entry rectangle, then if you click on that rectangle, then what we want to do is basically change what state of typing you have. So if entry rect collide point event.pause, then we will say if typing, then typing equals false. And then we'll say elif not typing. So again, this is where if you just did an else, you'd get this tricky little thing where it comes in and says, oh, if typing equals false, else, but then the else is checking if not typing. And so you'll just get this kind of sticky situation. So do an elif not typing, set typing equal to true. And we're just going to use if typing to handle a new type of event. So we'll come down into the level of this like elif. So this elif, and we'll say if event.type equals, and now we'll use a new type, which is pygame.text input. So that's you've hit a key that has a text value, and the typing variable is true. And so this is how we'll handle not modifying the beat name if you're not actively typing. And then we'll say plus equals event.text, because when you hit a text key, a P or an underscore, an apostrophe or an M, the value of the actual key that you hit as it appears in a string is event.text. Okay, and then we'll say if event.type equals pygame.key down, and we'll check if, so key down is another type of event, and we're using this to check if the specific key that was pressed, if event.key is equal to pygame.k_backspace. So we want to check if the backspace key was pressed and the length of beat name is greater than 0. And this is an important step because if the beat name is already empty, we don't want to try to remove text from the variable that's keeping track of the beat name. It's already 0 characters. But what we have to do here, because there's not really an easy way to just pop a character out of a string, you have to redefine it. And so what we'll do is we'll say beat name now is equal to the current beat name, and we use this range of characters. And so leaving there as a no character before this colon means start from the very beginning. And then a -1 means go to the character that is right before the end of the character. So this is basically just a way of grabbing the entire string up to the most recent character. And so just with these two, we have added functionality that's going to let us remove, and actually we want another and typing condition there. So now the entry rectangle should determine whether or not we are actively typing or not, and then the text input and key down characters here should change whether or not we're able to do anything. So we haven't handled the actual save button yet. We will do that next, but now let's go ahead and see how our menu works. So save, I'll click in here, and now I should be able to type Pete, backspace, backspace, backspace. I'm going to type Pete is cool. Now if I click this rectangle again, and I keep typing, yep, it's not doing anything, which is good. That's what I want, but we haven't visually shown that anyway. So let's go back into the save menu. Save menu. And let's add like a dark gray insert rectangle that says when it's time to type. Or maybe a light gray would make more sense, but I'm going to do with a dark gray because it's my tutorial. All right. And so what I'll do is I'll say before the entry rect. So where was that? Entry rect here. Yep. Control C. I will say if typing, and then I'm going to put this rectangle in here, and it doesn't need a name because I'm just using it to signify whether or not we're typing. And I'll say dark gray, and I will just make it solid in the same footprint, and that's okay because we're drawing it first, so your edge will still show up. And that should now be a good way to signify. So save beat. There we go. We're typing. Pete is cool. Okay. And if I click off of it, okay, well now I'm not typing anymore, and now I am. And I can do backspace and whatever, and if I close, it exits, and that's great. So let's go ahead and handle the save button. And I've kind of been putting it off because working with external files and saving data to a text file is just a few extra steps. And we have to kind of choose what data to store and in the right format. And it's a process. So let's get into it because it's very important to the functionality of this. Obviously, being able to save your favorite beats and come back and use them later is a huge value add to this kind of thing. So we'll come down here where we have our entry rectangle, and we'll add a new one. And we can really do these as elifs as well. And so we'll say elif saving button. Be very careful because now we have a save button and a saving button. And we'll say collide point with event.pause. And if so, then what we want to do is kind of, again, file equals open and our saved beats.txt file, but this time, remember in the very beginning, we read from it to store data into that variable. Now we're going to do a W, and that means we're going to write to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that saved beats list that we made in the very beginning, and we're going to append some data to it. And if you remember, I know it was a little while ago, we said what we're going to be adding. We always want to start this with a new line because if you don't, then anytime you save, then you could potentially be saving onto the same file, and then the way we're parsing data with the like per line, storing it as one entry in our list, would get messed up. So we'll do it this way. We'll do name, colon, and then space, and then we'll do string brackets beat name. So this is what you entered. Whoop, beat underscore name. Okay. And then we'll do comma, and then we'll do beats, colon, space, curly brackets, beats. And do pay attention to the format that you save it with, because later we're going to kind of have to reverse engineer this for our loading menu. So we're saving everything we would need. We're saving everything we would need to be able to recall this later. We're saving the clicked list, we're saving how many beats and beats per minute, and then a name that we gave it to be able to save it. And so we're going to add this as one item to our saved beats list, which means it's going to be the format of a saved beat. And then what we'll do is we'll say for I in range length of saved beats, there we go, we want to do file.write a string of saved beats. And this is what you have to do, because to write to a text file, it has to be a string. So you have to make a string conversion of each entry of your saved beats list. And then to get it to save outside of that for loop, we're going to do file.close, and that'll close up the text file with all the new data. And then we will go ahead and close the menu. So now save menu equals false, capital F, false. Because if you've just saved your beat, there's really no reason to stay in there. And then we'll set typing equal to false, because that's kind of our default, and we'll clear out the beat name variable. So this is kind of saying you've accomplished what you're here to do. And now, even though we don't have a way of loading it back in, you can see we have an empty saved beats text file right now. Let's go ahead and make one. So let's make a beat. I'll just make it the kind of like generic rock beat I've been doing. Sweet. I'm going to save beat, and I'm going to call it generic rock beat, and I'm going to hit save beat, and let's see. Okay, it's a good sign it didn't close anything. Let's go ahead now and look at our text file so you can get an idea for how we're saving it. Okay, this is pretty cool. It's name, generic rock beat, beats 8, BPM 240, and then selected. And this is the list. You can tell it's got all of the hi-hat. So that's what this first one is. And they're all on, which is why they're all ones. And then this is the snare, I believe. And you can see it's just the threes. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the snare. The kick drum is 1 and then 1, 1. So you can tell this is a list of everything we would need to do to recreate that beat. So once we've saved it, we could clear it out, we could close it and move on with our lives. And that's really cool. But we have no way of loading it in yet, so that brings us to the load menu. And I have been putting this off because it is probably the trickiest one. We have to take all of that information we stuffed in a text file, and we have to reverse engineer it out of a text file. So let's get started. Me complaining about it isn't going to make it go any faster. So let's go into the draw load menu function. Take a sip of water here. Okay, so we have the back rectangle and we have the exit button, which is a good way to start. I'm going to kind of poach the menu text from up here and the saving text and kind of steal those because we're going to just reuse them for a menu text, which now will say load menu and select a beat to load in. We'll just say load. That's fine. They know what they're doing. And then instead of saving button, we will say loading button. And instead of saving text, loading text. And that will say load beat. And that will say loading text. But the positions are probably good. And then obviously, in addition to exit button and everything, we are going to need to do the loading button as well. And I think we will want to also return a delete button probably, because maybe you've put too many in here now. So let's just also make a delete btn. That'll be good. And so we have a loading button. Let's go ahead and loading text. Let's go ahead and make a delete button, delete btn. And where should we put this? Delete button, pygame.draw.rect. Rect and screen and gray, you know how it be. And let's put this one on the screen roughly. So we'll do width divided by 2 to get the middle point, and we'll do minus 400. So kind of scooch it left from there. Width minus 2. Minus 400, that'll be the X starting position. We'll put it a little bit lower, so height times, what should we do, 0.9? I don't know, I'm getting a little delirious. This is a long tutorial. Okay, we'll make it solid, we'll make it round rectangle, and we will just see where that is, how that looks, and kind of go from there. I don't know why I would put this at 0.9. It should be at the same height as the load button. But let's see. So if this is starting at width minus 200 and this one starts at minus 400 and it's 200, that's going to touch our loading button. Let's try making this 500. I don't know. I'm playing around now. I'm in uncharted waters. All right. So we need to add some text. We need to do delete text and put that on our delete button. And that'll be label font.render. And this time we will do delete beat for the text. Delete beat. Okay. And then it should be white. And first we need to do true for the anti-alias. White. Come on, Pete, you know this. And then screen.blit. And then delete text. Delete text. Okay. And for location on this, we just want to kind of steal the X and Y starting position from up here. Control C, delete text, and scooch it a little bit inside. So let's see. Width now minus 500 instead of 500. Let's do like 485. And then height times 0.75, my friend. Okay. And then plus 10. Let's just see what we've done. I think this is hideous, but let's do the load menu. Load beat. Oh, that's not the worst thing in the world, is it? Okay. That looks all right. Let's go ahead and scoot delete beat down a little bit. What did we do for the other one? Plus 30? We'll do plus 30 again. Okay. And now we need to, if exit button tuple has no attribute. Collide point. Well, who's a tuple here? Exit button, pygame.draw.rect. I don't fully understand why I got that error. Load beat, close. Uh-oh. So tuple object has no attribute collide point. I understand what that means. But exit button is right here. Draw load menu. Exit button, loading button, delete button. Oh, maybe it's because we haven't told the loading button function it's getting a few things yet. So hang on. We're returning exit button, loading button, delete button. Come down to where you call those menus, and it's exit, loading button, and delete button. And now the close button should work, unless I am crazy. And I am not. All right, good job. Well, I might be, but let's move on. Okay, so back in the loading menu, we need to kind of set up a area that is going to be where we display the info from our loaded beats. So load menu, select a beat to load. We say that, we put the text on the screen, but we do not show currently like the area where the beats might be. So let's draw, I think like kind of a holding pen, like a outer rectangle where all the data is going to be displayed. So let's just do pygame.draw.rect for that. Let me think what the right way to do this would be. Yeah, let's draw a holding pen, if you will, and let's say pygame.draw.rect, and let's put it on the screen, and let's make it gray, and let's give it 190, 100 plus... Let's start at 190, 200. Let's just see how that looks. And let's make it, I don't know, 1,000 high. and 600 wide. I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted here because I want this to be, I think, like a outline, but I don't know if it makes more sense to have it like as a solid rectangle for displaying the loaded beats. So whatever I did, that's hideous. Let's fix this. Okay, let's fix this rectangle. I think 190, 90. We can make it 1,000 high. It'll be fine. 600 should be fine. 5 and 5 is probably okay. I think what we'll want to do, load beat. I think what we'll want to do is just move load and delete lower down, because I do like the idea of being able to show quite a few different beats. So maybe instead of 0.75 on these, we do try like 0.9 or close to it. Let's scoot these down and do like 0.87. Let's try that 0.87, 0.87, 0.87 plus 30. Let's take a look at that load beat. There we go. That's not bad, actually. Kind of that entry rectangle. And so let's go ahead and call that something. Let's call that, I don't know, beats rectangle, loaded rectangle. We'll call it loaded rectangle. Yep. And I think we'll want to return that too, because if you clicked in there somewhere, you'd probably be selecting a beat. Okay. So let's come down to our function where we grab stuff back, delete button, and we'll say load rectangle down there. Okay. Or loaded, it doesn't really matter. All right, and let's see about actually parsing data in this draw load menu. So we have to kind of check on what index has been selected. So first, you know what we should do? We have a text file with one saved beat. Let's go ahead and make a second one. Okay, so let's just make this stupid. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I'll just call this Tom and clap. Save the beat, and let's go ahead and close that and look at our text file. So now you see we've got these two. And let's say we have the load menu and we want to parse through the data of those two and show them on the screen. We want to show how many beats they have. We want to show their name and everything. So what we need to do is we need to start checking on like how do we get the specific stuff inside of those. And so let's just dive into it. There's no easy way of doing this. So here's what we do. We start and we say for beat in range length of saved beats. So remember, saved beats is a list where each item in the list is a long string that has one of those saved beats in it. So for beat in range length of saved beats, and let's just set up our rectangle to display 10. So if beat is less than 10, meaning we'll start at 0. Okay, beat clicked is going to be equal to an empty list, and we just kind of have to set up some stuff to parse through this. It's a really long string. So row text is going to be equal to medium font dot render, and we're just going to show what row this is. So it'll be F, and then that's a formatted string, and there'll be beat plus 1 because it's going to start at 0. But again, I don't really think we should say anything as the 0th beat. It'll be the first beat. And we'll say true and white, and we'll put that on the screen. So screen.blit, and we'll give it the row text, and we'll put it at 200, 100 plus the beat. 200, 100 plus the beat times 50. So that's how we'll make this work for 10, because the rectangle is like 600 high. All right, so that should be all we have to do to put the row text on there. But we have to start getting some indexes. So this is where, if you're familiar with string manipulation in Python, you'll be a little bit ahead of the curve, because a lot of what you're about to see might not make a ton of sense unless you're familiar with strings. So we need to figure out where to start the name. And so we'll say saved beats, so that is the list of all the beats that we've saved, and then beats, so we're calling our specific string, and then we need to find the index value, so this is where in that string we first see this specific substring, so the index of name colon space. And you'll see why I was so particular when we set up that write instruction to the list, because we have to replicate that in reverse to tear it apart. Okay, and then because there are 6 characters in this string, NAME colon and space, we're going to add a 6 right there. And then the name index end, end is going to be equal to saved beats at beat dot index. And then it's going to be, so this now is going to be where the next thing in our string is added in. And so if you think about it, I'll actually pull up the text file here. Name ends when we get to colon space beats. So we kind of have to do this thing where we check where each piece of it starts and stops by doing this. So beats, just like that, is going to be where we want to end it. And then name text, the actual text for each of these, is going to be equal to, and we'll make this medium font so that we can put it on screen, dot render. And then the text for it is going to be saved beats from at beat. So that tells you which item to use. And then we need to do what's going to be from name index start and then colon name index end. And so this might seem a little confusing, but what we just did is say, okay, take the list of all the saved beats, choose it for the specific one we're looking at, and then from where this name text stops, so basically the next character after this name colon space appears, all the way up until this colon space beats appears, that is the actual text that is the saved name for this beat. And then we want it to be true and then white, and then we're putting it on the screen. So screen.blit, and it's going to be the name text, and it's going to be comma and then 240 and then 100 plus beat times 50. Oop, that is not the times. There we go. Beat times 50. And so this is just where we're putting the row text as well. And let's go ahead and just start there because I think if you're familiar with how this works, when we go to the load menu, you can see we have generic rock beat, tom, and clap. And those are the first and second names. That's really great. So that's awesome. What we have to do now is we have to figure out how to parse the rest of the data, because that is just one of the items, and that's great for showing them on the screen, but we also need to figure out how to get the beats per minute and the selected list out of there. So this is going to be a little tricky. Bear with me, and again, if you get lost in the specifics, be sure to slow the video down, rewatch the parts that confuse you, and feel free to ask your questions in the comments below. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to say if 0 is less than or equal to index, and we're going to get to this index variable we're about to make in just a second. So if it's greater than 0 and less than the length of saved beats. Whoop, I am typing all over the place. Shift tab, get out of here. There we go. And less than the length of our saved beats file. So this means that you currently have a beat selected. We're going to use index as a way of selecting a specific beat. So this, I'm going to put it up here so we don't forget to pass it in. But we are going to select by clicking on one of those beat names. We're going to select which one we want to load in, and that's going to be the index variable. And then based on what's been selected, we're going to need to do some additional work. So we're going to need to figure out where the index end for the beats is, and that's going to be equal to saved beats at our specific beat. So that's why we still want it to be, wait a second, length saved beats, and we want to add a second condition here, and beat is equal to index. So that's why we're putting this inside of our for loop still, because this will check and see if, while we're getting the names for each beat, this will check and see if we've also actively selected a beat. And so and beat is equal to index. All right. Then what we'll do is we'll say at that dot index. So just like before, and now the next one starts at colon space. Make sure you're in a string variable, colon space BPM, because this is where the beats per minute variable starts. And so that makes the loaded beats, which is a new variable, equal to integer of saved beats dot beat. Trying to be very careful here because we have to do this kind of double indexing thing again. So it's not save beats dot beat. It's save beats at beat, and then we have to do from name index end plus 8 to beats index end. So the reason it starts at name index end is because or name index end plus 8 characters is because this is going to start with the colon, and it's going to end 8 characters later, which is when the actual beats value starts. And that's why we put an int in here to convert it to a number. So what it's doing is we're indexing from this character to this character, and we're turning it into a number. So even though it looks like 8 is a number, this is actually inside of a string. So it's just another string character until we do that int. But now we're getting back the loaded beats, which is great. And we have to do basically the exact same thing for the BPMs. So the BPM index end, BPM index end, which is a new variable as well, is going to be equal to saved beats at beat, and then it's going to be dot index, and this one is going to be now when colon space selected. Oh, I didn't put it in quotes again. Here we go. When that appears, that's going to be the index that's going to say, okay, this is the end of the BPM section. Selected, and that's going to make the loaded BPMs equal to pretty much the same thing as this loaded beats, just with different index values. So I'll grab that. So this one is going to go from the, not from the name index end, but from the beats index end, and it's not going to be plus 8, it's going to be plus 6. I think I typed an 8 again. And then this one is going to go until BPM index end, beats index end. Interesting. Oh, it's just beat index end. There we go. Okay, and so now we have the BPMs, the beats, and the name of it, and what we don't have is just the trickiest part, which is going to be the selected list. So we have to now loaded clicks, right, because we called it clicked in the outside world. So loaded clicks, and I'm going to differentiate it. Loaded clicks as a string is going to be equal to saved beats at beat. And then we already actually have all the info we need for the rest of this one. It's going to be BPM index end, but then this one is going to be plus 14, okay? And I'm about to explain why it's plus 14, and it's going to go essentially to the end minus 3 characters. And the reason for that is we need to do what's called splitting the strings out. So if you say this is where it started, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 characters before we get to the first 1 or minus 1 in our list. And then if you go to the very end, we have a space and then 2 end brackets at the very end, which is why it goes to minus 3. That's going to give us a string of all of our values. Now we have to split that string into a list, and to do that we're going to use the built-in split function, but we have to tell them what to separate each list item on. So we're going to split it. We go down to loaded clicks, and we are going to call this now a rows, because we have to split this twice, right? It's currently just one long string. We need to split it into a list of strings, and then we have to split each string into actual ones and negative ones. So to do that, we create this intermediate list, which will be loaded clicks rows, and set equal to list. And then inside of this, we do loaded clicks string, and then dot split is the built-in function to split a long string into a list. And it's going to be open bracket like that, and then comma, and then space, and then close bracket, or backwards, close bracket, comma, space, open bracket. And the reason for this is, again, if we look at the text file, what splits up in between each entry, each item in that selected list, is a closed bracket, and then a comma, and then a space, and then open bracket. And so that's what's going to split each item into its own list item in here. Okay, so now we get to do some more complicated stuff. So bear with me. And once we're through this, maybe really take a look at what each line is doing and think about what it's doing, and really try to make sense of it, and then ask me if you still have questions after that. But so for row in range, length of the loaded clicks rows list that we just made. So we're setting up a for loop to go through there, and we're going to say if loaded clicks here we go. If loaded clicks row item. So item is just checking. We don't want this to be row. We want this to be item. I'm getting ahead of myself. That we do want that to be row, and we want to say loaded clicks row is equal to, and I'm just going to create another intermediate variable just to get my head straight, because there's a lot of words going on. So we'll say loaded clicks row is equal to loaded clicks rows, plural, at that specific row. And then what we're going to do is we're going to split that row item, split out, and we're going to do it based on a comma and then a space. And the reason I add the space is because when you do a split, it's going to give each thing in between those its own item in the list, but it's going to get rid of this text that was in the string. So we do it this way. And then that's going to split it up and make a new list, and that we're going to store that in loaded clicks row. And then what we're going to do is go through and say for item, because they're not yet integers, in range, and it'll be the length of the loaded clicks row that we just made. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to check if loaded clicks row singular at item is equal to, and we'll check if it's equal to the string of 1 or the string of -1. And the reason we're doing this is once this has been sorted once, we don't want to run it again. So we'll say or if loaded clicks item is equal to -1, because in theory those are the only two things the items should ever be equal to. And we don't need another if, we just need an or. So if it's equal to a string value of 1 or a string value of -1, then what we do is we say that loaded clicks row item is equal to the integer value of loaded clicks row at item. And the reason we're doing this if check is because once it's become an integer, this won't execute anymore, so we don't have to execute this anymore because everything is already an integer. All right, so that's why we do that. And then we come out of the if and we say that we want to track what beat was what loaded in beat is. Let me say this correctly. We want to make a list of the clicked values of what was loaded in. So if we have this loaded clicked list that basically reflects the outside clicked world, then we want to make sure that we are appending at the right time. So we'll come back up here to where we did this beat clicked list, and we will append each list in here. So we'll say, let me make sure I get my indentation right, beat clicked dot append, and we're going to add loaded clicks row. Each time we do another row, and then we'll say loaded click is equal to beat clicked. There we go. And we'll want to, as well as the loaded rectangle, we'll want to return the loaded clicked. But we need to return the loaded clicked, and we need to return the beats and the BPM. So let's make another variable out here, and let's call it loaded info, and let's make it a list. And so it'll have loaded beats in it, it'll have loaded BPM in it, and it'll have loaded click in it. All right. But what we need to do, because right now there's a reasonable scenario where nothing has been selected yet. And so these might not exist, because right now the only place we define them is if something's been selected, if we've set that index value. So what we want to do in the very beginning is just initialize them like you would in the beginning of your program, but we'll do it inside the function. So loaded clicked equals 0, loaded beats equals 0. Loaded clicked is an empty list, not 0, but you get the idea. And loaded BPM is equal to 0. Okay, so we need to do those three things, and then we pass it all back in loaded info, and so we'll pass that back instead. So this was, I know, one of the more complicated things we've done. Manipulating strings like this is a little bit tricky, but we actually did some really advanced stuff here. So if you're a beginner, you should congratulate yourself if you just managed to follow along and understand most of what we just did, because that's some pretty tricky string work. Now we get to kind of go down to the event handling and actually set up what we want each of these things to do. So we come down here to the area that's outside of checking that it's not the save menu and load menu. So it's this second part. And we will come on down, if saving button collide point, beat length, file. Okay, so if mouse button is up, entry rectangle. What we want to do now is we want to say elif, and what did we say? Loaded rectangle. So if loaded rectangle was clicked, then we want the index to be equal to, and we're going to use that event position at 1, which is the Y position, minus 100, and then we are going to floor divide that by 50, and this will give us a value 1 through 10, telling us like where on the y-axis we just clicked, and we'll use that index for what the active beat should be. So let's come back up in loaded menu and use that index to draw something that's going to indicate the actively selected beat. Okay, so back in our loaded menu, we're passing the index in. Let me make sure we're actually passing it in though. Load menu, draw load menu. Here we go. We want to make sure we pass that in, and actually we don't initialize it in the beginning, do we? So let's call it up here. We'll just say index is initially equal to 100. That way it's not selected. Okay, and draw load menu. We'll say okay if load menu 0 0, but we want to use the index to draw a rectangle on the screen if it's in our range. So underneath load rectangle, I will say if the index, if 0 is less than or equal to the index, and it's less than the length of our saved beats list. So this is checking that we have one, it's less than the length of our list, then we will pygame.draw.rect the screen. We will make it, let's do a light gray. So this will be the last gray I add, I swear. And we'll make it 190, and then we'll have it start at 100 plus index times 50. And we will have it 1000 wide and 50 tall. So light gray, let's go ahead and define that up top. And this, again, it's moving the opposite direction of our basic gray. So light gray, and this will be like a 170, 170, 170. Okay, and now I'm hoping when we do the load menu, load beat, broke something, too many values to unpack, expected 4, because I don't think I told it to expect loaded info coming back yet. So let's see. Load menu, loaded info, and load rectangle, loaded info. Correct. There we go. Loaded info. All right. So now let's open up loaded beat, generic rock beat. Oh, string has no. Yeah, I sure did mean index. I sure did. So let's go check that out. And which one did I put index for? Index. There we go. Alrighty, let's try that again. Load beat. Hey, we got a light gray rectangle. If I click the top one, if I click second one, if I click third one, it goes away. Great, because there's no beat there. And I click those. That's sweet, but we are not able to delete things yet, and we're not able to load things in yet. So let's keep working on the buttons. All right, back to our event handling down here. And there are maybe ways I could have set this up differently, but I kind of did them as we got to each event. So let's come down here and say, all right, we have all these elifs, loaded rectangle. Let's do elif delete button dot collide point with event dot position. And then if we deleted something, then what we want to do is actually not too bad. It's if index, so pretty much that same thing. If index is between 0, so index needs to be greater than or equal to 0, and index needs to be less than the length of saved beats. And I can say less than because the length of saved beats is always going to be 1 greater than the largest index value of it. So if there are 3 values in there, their indexes are 0, 1, and 2. So what we'll do is we will just save beats.pop whatever was at the index, and that'll let us delete an entry. That one's pretty easy. We'll highlight the functionality of a few of these at the same time once we get them working, okay? So next, let's do the loading button, because that one's kind of tricky. And we will do elif loading button dot collide point event dot pause. That part's easy. The next part is familiar. If 0 less than or equals to index less than length of saved beats, then we're going to set a few of our variables equal to the information that we pull in. So beats is going to be equal to the loaded info that we pass back, which I believe we just called loaded info. Yep. Loaded info at 0. So the first thing was beats, loaded info 0. And then the second thing was BPM. And so that'll be loaded info at 1. And then the third was clicked, which will be loaded info at 2. And we will set the index back equal to 100, so that's like an irrelevant number. And then we will set load menu equal to false, just like we did when the save button was pressed, because your work is kind of done now. And we will, that should be all we have to do, I believe. So let's go ahead and check it out now if we have got all of the functionality on that load button. I think the close button was working. I think we're able to click in there. So right now, looking at our screen, we have nothing going on. There's nothing loaded in. If I load that generic rock beat in, well, I hit load beat and nothing happened. It did close. Load beat. Let's try Tom and clap. Okay. Close. I can feel it, but no cigar. So, what's going on? Okay, I think the reason the loading button is not working is we just did elif loaded rectangle earlier. It needs to be elif loaded rectangle dot collide point with event dot position. So I'm really amazed the indexing and highlighting of the rectangles was working without this, but that should let us load it in. So let's go ahead and check load beat, generic rock beat, load beat. There we go. And that's really sweet. Now let's try clearing the board. That's also awesome. Let's see if deleting one works. So let's get rid of Tom and Clap because this is kind of stupid anyways. So let's go ahead and see if we can delete it. And it looks like we got rid of it. Now let's do something that uses more beats and more beats per minute. So let's do 24. Is that like a logical thing? And let's make this a higher number, like 480, and see if that works. Okay, so we're up much higher now, and let's just kind of put, I'm going to turn it off just so it's not too much noise for you guys. So that's 8. That's 12, 16, 20, and then for these last 4, we'll do crashes. All right, and then let's do bass, snare. Actually, we're going to want to spread these out a little bit because it's sort of twice as fast as a normal rock beat. So we'll do bass, bass, snare, take a pause, and then we'll do bass, bass, snare, take a pause, bass, bass, snare, and then we'll do clap, clap, clap at the end, and we'll do floor toms at the end. Let's see what these sound like. And we'll add some floor toms because we're hardcore. All right, so I'm going to save this beat, and I'm just going to call it interesting, clear board, save beat. So that's not working now. We need to figure out why our save beat buttons aren't working. What do we do to mess up the rest of this? Collide point, event dot pause. I think we don't want these all to be elifs because technically they're in the same spots. Let's see if that solves it. I think that's causing us strife. Let's check that out. Load beat. Entry rectangle is not defined. Something strange is happening. Load beat. We need to check out why entry rectangle is not defined. It's coming from save menu. Oh, well, yeah, entry rectangle is not going to be defined because if save menu is not true, then there's no rect. So let's come down to the rectangles like this one, and let's just add something here that's if save menu, and then we'll put all of this inside of it. And I think we'll want the same thing for these 3 because they're loading only. So we'll say if load menu. So we do need to distinguish that we don't want to check for anything with these 3 buttons if that is not true, and then hopefully that'll take care of it. So if we load in, saving button is not defined. But why do you care? I thought I have you checked out so you don't care. Oh, we want all of this inside the same if save menu. There we go. Let's try that. Load beat, tom and clap. There it is. Clear the beat. Load in generic rock beat. Let's load it in. Yeah, that's hardcore. All right, let's just make it 12 and let's do something stupid. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let's try to save this as longer beat. Let's save it. Let's see if we can load in longer beat. Yeah, I'll go ahead and clear this. I'll load in the generic rock beat. I'll load in the generic rock beat. Okay. I'll clear it out, and I'll see if I can load in the longer beat. Yeah, and it makes it 12. All right. So we have the ability to turn off individual channels. We have the ability to play and pause. We have the ability to edit while something's active or inactive. We have the ability to change how many beats are in the loop. We have the ability to save beats. We have the ability to load beats. We have the ability to clear the board, This is a really cool app. I had a ton of fun building it. Obviously, it's a challenging tutorial. I know it's been a really long time. So if you stuck it out the whole time, I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any questions about things we didn't cover or you'd like to see expanded upon, or you tried this yourself and you're running into snags, just let me know about it in the comments below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to my channel. It helps me out a ton, and I post tons of great content just like this every week. So without any further ado, good luck with your projects, and thanks for watching. Take it easy. Until next time, bye.